Sarah Chen stood in the cargo bay of Junction Station Alpha and checked her datapad for the third time. The diplomatic escort assignment should have been simple. Pick up the Valorian trade minister, take him to the peace talk, stand around looking professional for 6 hours, then go home. Easy work for a junior officer. But the Valorian minister's ship was delayed. Something about engine trouble near the asteroid belt. Sarah would have to wait at least another 4 hours. She sighed and leaned against a storage container. The cargo bay was quiet this time of cycle. Most of the station's inhabitants were either sleeping or working in the commercial sectors. The dim emergency lighting cast long shadows across the metal floor. Sarah didn't mind the quiet. After 3 months of crowded ship assignments, a little peace felt good. Then she heard the sound. It was small. A scratching noise like claws on metal. Sarah straightened up and turned toward the noise. Her hand moved to her sidearm out of habit, though she didn't draw it. Junction Station was neutral ground. Violence here meant immediate ejection into space by the automated defense systems. The scratching came again, followed by a soft chirping sound. Sarah moved slowly toward a stack of cargo containers near the far wall. The scratching grew louder. Something was definitely back there. Something alive. She rounded the corner and stopped. 2 small aliens crouched behind the containers. They were covered in thick fur that looked silver in the dim light. Each one was about the size of a large dog, with pointed ears that swiveled toward her when she appeared. Their eyes were huge and reflective, catching the light like mirrors. Long tails curled around their bodies, and their paws had retractable claws that clicked nervously on the floor. Sarah recognized the species immediately from her xenobiology training, Carvathi, a warrior race known throughout the sector for their military strength and fierce pride. These 2 were juveniles, cubs, and they looked terrified. The larger of the 2 cubs stepped in front of the smaller one and made a low, growling sound. The growl shook a little at the end. The cub was trying to sound dangerous, but fear leaked through the attempt. Sarah held up both hands, palms out. She kept her movements slow and careful. "Hey," she said softly. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The cubs didn't understand her words. The Carvathi language was all clicks and growls that human vocal cords couldn't reproduce. But her tone seemed to help. The larger cub's ears twitched forward slightly. Sarah slowly crouched down, making herself smaller and less threatening. She was still taller than the cubs even while crouching, but it helped. "Are you lost?" she asked, keeping her voice gentle. The smaller cub peeked around the larger one and chirped something. The sound was high and worried. Sarah's heart squeezed. Lost children were lost children, no matter what species they belonged to. She pulled out her datapad and switched on the translation app. The app was basic and glitchy, but it might help. She held it out and spoke clearly. "I am Sarah, I am human. Do you need help?" The datapad made a series of clicks and growls. The translation was probably terrible, but the cub's ears perked up. The larger one made a careful sound back. The datapad beeped and displayed text. "Lost. Cannot find parents. Door sealed." Sarah's stomach sank. The station had experienced some kind of malfunction about an hour ago. She'd heard the announcements about sealed sections and maintenance crews working on the problem. These cubs must have been separated from their family when the emergency bulkheads came down. "Your parents are in the diplomatic wing?" Sarah asked through the translator. The smaller cub nodded. The gesture was almost human. Sarah felt a small relief. At least some body language crossed species barriers. "The sections will open again soon," Sarah said. "You're safe here. I'll wait with you." She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a ration bar. It was supposed to be her dinner, but she could get more later. She unwrapped it slowly and broke it in half. The cubs watched every movement with laser focus. Sarah held out half the bar toward them. "Hungry?" The larger cub sniffed the air. Its nose wrinkled. Probably smelled weird to a carnivore species. But after a moment of hesitation, the cub stepped forward and carefully took the food from Sarah's hand. The smaller cub followed its sibling's lead. They nibbled at the ration bar with sharp little teeth. Their faces said they didn't love the taste, but they ate it anyway. Hunger won over pickiness. Sarah smiled and ate her own half of the bar. She sat down cross-legged on the cold floor, trying to look relaxed and non-threatening. The cubs watched her with those big reflective eyes. "I have cubs too," Sarah said, even though the translator probably couldn't handle the concept. "Well, human cubs. We call them children. My niece and nephew. They're about your size. She pulled up a photo on her data pad and turned it toward them. The cubs leaned forward to look at the image. Their ears swiveled with interest. The smaller one made a questioning chirp. Those are human cubs, Sarah explained. That's my family. The larger cub touched the datapad screen with one claw very gently. Then it looked up at Sarah with something that might have been understanding. A loud alarm suddenly blared through the cargo bay. Red warning lights began flashing. Sarah jumped to her feet as an automated voice echoed through the space. Environmental system failure in sections C through F. All personnel evacuate to safe zones immediately. The temperature dropped noticeably within seconds. Sarah's breath became visible in the cold air. The cubs made distressed sounds and huddled together. Sarah's mind raced through her options. The diplomatic wing was in Section E, still sealed. The main habitation areas were clear across the station. The cubs wouldn't make it that far in the cold, not dressed in just their fur. Karvathi came from a warm planet. They couldn't handle extreme cold well. She looked at the shivering cubs and made her decision. Come on, Sarah said, gesturing toward the cargo bay exit. We need to move. Follow me. The larger cub understood her urgency, if not her words. It made a quick sound to its sibling, and both cubs moved toward Sarah. They stayed close to her legs as she led them out of the cargo bay and into the station's corridors. The hallways were dark except for emergency lighting. Most of the power was being diverted to life support in the occupied sections. Sarah pulled out her pocket light and swept it ahead of them. The cubs' eyes glowed in the beam like little moons. She knew a place they could go, an old observation deck in Section H that usually had independent power. It was a long walk through maintenance corridors, but they could make it. They had to make it. Sarah looked down at the two small aliens following trustingly beside her. Their parents were trapped behind sealed doors until the maintenance crews fixed the problem. That wouldn't happen until dawn cycle at the earliest. These cubs needed warmth, safety, and someone to watch over them through the long night ahead. Stay close to me, Sarah said softly. The cubs pressed closer to her legs as they walked into the darkened corridors. I've got you. You're going to be okay. Behind them, the cargo bay's lights flickered and died completely. Ahead, the station stretched out in shadow and uncertainty. Sarah clicked on her pocket light and kept walking. The cubs matched her pace, their claws clicking softly on the metal floor. The night was just beginning. The maintenance corridors were darker than Sarah expected. Her pocket light cut through the shadows, but it felt like the darkness was pressing in from all sides. The cubs stayed close to her, one on each side. Their breathing was quick and nervous. Sarah checked her datapad station map. The observation deck was 3 sections away. They would need to go through 2 maintenance junctions and a cargo transfer area. The route wasn't dangerous under normal circumstances, but with the environmental systems failing, anything could happen. The larger cub suddenly stopped walking. Its ears swiveled backward, picking up some sound Sarah couldn't hear. The cub made a low warning growl. What is it? Sarah whispered. The smaller cub pressed against Sarah's leg. Both cubs were staring down a side corridor that branched off from their path. Sarah aimed her light down the corridor and saw nothing but shadows. Then something moved. A maintenance drone floated out of the darkness. It was a standard repair unit, about the size of a refrigerator with multiple arms folded against its body. Under normal circumstances, the drones were harmless. They fixed pipes, welded seals, and cleaned air filters. But this drone wasn't moving normally. It jerked and stuttered through the air. Its arms twitched randomly. One of its optical sensors was dark, and the other glowed an angry red instead of the usual calm blue. The system malfunctions had affected the drones too. Sarah's hand moved to her sidearm. She didn't want to use it. Weapons fire in station corridors could breach the hull. But if the drone attacked, she might not have a choice. The drone's functional sensor focused on them. Its arms unfolded with a screech of metal. One arm had a welding torch. Another had a cutting laser. The drone made a sound like grinding gears and moved toward them. Sarah stepped in front of the cubs. Stay behind me, she said firmly. The larger cub made a protesting sound. In their culture, cubs didn't hide behind others. But the smaller cub grabbed its sibling and pulled it back. Some instinct told it that Sarah knew what she was doing. The drone came closer. Its red sensor flashed. Sarah could hear the whine of its cutting laser powering up. She pulled out her datapad with her free hand and spoke into it clearly. Authorization Chensara Lieutenant Human Fleet. Command Override Alpha 773. Shut down all maintenance drones in this section. The datapad transmitted the command codes. For a moment, nothing happened. The drone kept advancing. Its laser was fully charged now, a pinpoint of bright red light. Then the drone jerked to a stop. Its arms froze in mid-movement. The red sensor flickered and went dark. The drone's power core made a descending whine as it shut down completely. Sarah let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. The cubs made impressed chirping sounds behind her. Command codes, Sarah explained, though she knew they probably didn't understand. Every human officer gets them. They let us override station systems in emergencies. She smiled down at them. Comes in handy sometimes. The larger cub stepped around Sarah's legs and approached the now dead drone cautiously. It sniffed at the machine and poked it with one claw. When the drone didn't move, the cub looked back at Sarah with what might have been respect in those big eyes. They continued walking. The cub seemed more confident now, less scared. They began exploring the corridors as they went. The smaller cub would dart ahead to investigate interesting corners, then run back to Sarah. The larger cub climbed up on storage containers to get better views of their surroundings. Sarah watched them with amusement. They were still frightened, still lost, but their natural curiosity was stronger than their fear. It reminded her of her nephew, who would explore any new place with fearless enthusiasm. Through the translation app, Sarah learned their names. The larger cub was Reth. He was the protective one, always positioning himself between his sister and any potential threat. The smaller cub was Kira. She was clever and curious, always finding new things to investigate. They asked Sarah questions constantly. The translator struggled with most of them, but Sarah did her best to answer. What was that pipe for? Why did the lights blink? Where did humans come from? How did humans travel between stars? Sarah answered each question as simply as she could. She pointed out the water pipes and explained how the station recycled everything. She showed them the power conduits and described how fusion reactors worked. She told them about Earth, a planet covered mostly in water, where humans had learned to build boats before they learned to build starships. Reth wanted to know if humans were strong fighters. Sarah laughed and shook her head. Not really, she admitted. Humans aren't very strong compared to most species. We don't have claws or armor or poisonous bites. We're actually pretty weak. Reth looked confused. The translator caught his question. Then how did humans survive? Sarah thought about that as they walked. We learned to work together, she finally said. We made tools. We figured out problems. When something scared us, we studied it until we understood it. When something was stronger than us, we found ways around it. She smiled at the cubs. We're good at adapting, at changing ourselves to fit new situations. Kira chirped something that the translator rendered as, like water. Sarah blinked in surprise. That was actually a perfect comparison. Yes, she said. Exactly like water. Water isn't strong, but it always finds a way through. They reached a large cargo transfer area. It was a vast space filled with stacked containers and floating pallets held in place by magnetic locks. The ceiling was high and lost in shadows. Their footsteps echoed in the emptiness. The cubs' natural hunting instincts kicked in. They could see perfectly in the dim light with their large reflective eyes. Sarah watched as they began stalking through the cargo area like tiny predators, practicing skills that were written into their DNA. Reth climbed up a stack of containers with easy grace. His claws found purchase on the metal, and his powerful leg muscles launched him from level to level. He reached the top and called down to his sister with a triumphant sound. Kira took a different approach. She studied the magnetic locks on the floating pallets and figured out that she could jump from one to another. She bounced between them like stepping stones, her balance perfect. Sarah watched them play and felt something warm in her chest. This was what children were supposed to do: explore, play, learn about their world. The fact that these children had fur and claws and came from a planet dozens of light years away didn't change that basic truth. Having fun? Sarah called up to them. Both cubs stopped and looked at her. Then they looked at each other. Some silent communication passed between them. They scampered back down and returned to Sarah's side. Reth made a soft sound. The translator displayed, "Thank you for protecting us." Sarah knelt down and looked both cubs in their large eyes. "You don't need to thank me," she said gently. "Taking care of children is what adults do. Any adult. Any species. It's the most important job there is. Kira tilted her head, processing this idea. In Karvathi culture, cubs were taught to be strong and independent early. Asking for help was seen as weakness. But this human seemed to think protecting children was a sign of strength, not weakness. Sarah stood and checked her datapad. They were close to the observation deck now. Just one more junction to cross. Come on, she said. Let's find somewhere warm where you two can rest. The cubs followed willingly. They trusted her now completely. When they reached a split in the corridor, Sarah pointed right, and they went right without question. When she told them to be quiet near a damaged environmental seal, they immediately went silent. They moved through the darkened station like a small pack. Sarah in the lead with her light. Reth on her right, alert and protective. Kira on her left, curious and watchful. Finally, they reached the observation deck. Sarah entered her access codes and the door slid open with a soft hiss. Warm air spilled out from inside. The deck's independent power was still working. The lights were on and the temperature was comfortable. The cubs ran inside and immediately began exploring the new space. Sarah smiled and closed the door behind them. They were safe now. They could rest here until the station's main systems came back online at dawn. Sarah looked out the observation window at the nebula glowing in the darkness beyond the station. It was going to be a long night, but looking at the two cubs already investigating every corner of the room, she thought it might not be a bad night at all. The observation deck was smaller than Sarah remembered from her last visit to Junction Station. It was a rectangular room with one wall made entirely of transparent aluminum, looking out into space. Comfortable benches lined the other walls, and a small maintenance station in the corner held emergency supplies. The cubs explored every centimeter of the room. Reth jumped up on the benches and sniffed at the cushions. Kira found the maintenance station and chirped with excitement at all the interesting equipment stored there. Sarah pulled out some emergency blankets from the maintenance locker and spread them on the floor near the window. The view outside was spectacular. A purple and blue nebula filled half the visible space, its clouds of gas and dust glowing with light from newborn stars hidden inside. The station's running lights reflected off the nearby asteroids, creating points of brightness in the darkness. She sat down on the blankets and looked out at the view. After a moment, both cubs came over and sat near her. Not too close yet. They were still wild creatures at heart, but near enough to feel safe. Beautiful, isn't it? Sarah said quietly. Kira pressed her face against the transparent wall and made an odd sound. Reth sat on his haunches and stared at the nebula with wide eyes. Whatever their cultural differences, the beauty of space crossed all barriers. Sarah pulled out her datapad and brought up some photos from Earth. She showed them to the cubs, using the translator to explain. This is where humans come from, she said, showing them a picture of Earth from orbit. That blue planet. The cubs leaned in to look. The translator caught Reth's question. So much water. How do you not drown? Sarah laughed. We learned to swim, and we built boats to float on the water. Then we built ships to fly above it. Then we built starships to travel between worlds. She swiped to another photo. This is a forest. See those tall plants? We call them trees. Human children love to climb them. Kira chirped excitedly and pointed at a photo of Sarah's nephew sitting in a tree branch. The translator displayed like climbing containers. Exactly like that, Sarah agreed. Children explore. It's what you're supposed to do. How else do you learn about the world? She showed them more pictures. Cities full of lights, mountains covered in snow, oceans stretching to the horizon. The cubs watched each image with fascination. Their world was different from Earth. Drier, warmer, covered in red sand and tall stone formations. But the idea of home, the concept of a place where you belonged, that was universal. Reth made a rumbling sound that might have been a sigh. The translator caught his words. We want to go home. Miss Parents, Sarah's heart squeezed. I know, she said softly. Your parents are looking for you right now. They're worried about you. But the doors will open at dawn and you'll see them again. I promise. Promise? Kira repeated the word carefully, her translator struggling with the concept. A promise is when you give your word that something will happen, Sarah explained. It means you'll do everything in your power to make it true. Breaking a promise is one of the worst things a human can do. The cubs absorbed this information. In their culture, promises were bonds of honor. enforced by severe social consequences if broken. The fact that humans had the same concept made Sarah seem more trustworthy. Reth moved a bit closer to Sarah, close enough that she could see the individual hairs in his silver fur. "Humans are strange," he said through the translator. "Not strong, not fast, not good eyes in dark. How did humans become space travelers?" Sarah thought about how to explain it. "Humans are good at working together," she finally said. "We make friends easily. Even with other species." "Other species?" Kira's ears perked up. "Like who?" Sarah smiled and pulled up more photos on her datapad. "On Earth, we share our planet with many creatures. Some of them became our friends, our partners." She showed them a picture of a dog. "This is a dog. Dogs are predators like you. They have sharp teeth and strong jaws. But thousands of years ago, humans and dogs became friends. We helped each other hunt. We protected each other. Now dogs live with humans and are part of our families." Both cubs stared at the image. The translator caught their rapid conversation with each other. They were trying to understand how a predator species could partner with what should have been prey. Sarah showed them a cat next. "This is a cat. Cats are also hunters. They have claws like yours. Humans loved cats because cats killed the small creatures that ate our food stores. So we invited cats to live with us. Now many humans have cats as companions." "Companions?" Reth's head tilted. "Not servants? Not slaves?" "No," Sarah said firmly. "Friends, partners. They choose to stay with us and we choose to care for them. It makes both of us stronger." She pulled up a picture of a horse. "These are horses. They're strong and fast. Humans rode on their backs to travel long distances. We took care of horses and they carried us where we needed to go." The cubs were fascinated. Their culture didn't have this concept. Karvathi had always been the apex predator on their world. They'd never needed to partner with other species. The idea was strange to them. Strange but interesting. "So humans are weak," Kira said slowly, working through the idea. "But you make friends with strong creatures. Then you become strong together?" "Yes," Sarah said. "Exactly. Humans learned a long time ago that working together is better than working alone. We learned it with animals on our planet first. Then we learned it with other alien species when we reached the stars." Reth made a thoughtful sound. "Our people think differently. Karvathi believe we must be strong alone. Asking for help is weakness. Needing others is shameful," Sarah nodded. She'd learned about Karvathi culture in her training. "That's one way to live," she said carefully. "But humans discovered something important. Being willing to trust others, being willing to help others. That takes a different kind of strength. The kind that builds friendships across any distance." She looked at both cubs seriously. "You two were scared and lost. You could have hidden and refused my help. That would have been the strong thing to do in your culture. But you accepted my help instead. Was that weak?" The cubs looked at each other. Then they looked back at Sarah. Neither of them answered, but she could see them thinking about it. The hours passed slowly. Sarah told them stories about Earth. She described snow to them, a concept they struggled to understand since their world was so warm. She explained about oceans and the creatures that lived in them. She told them about human children who explored forests and climbed mountains, and asked endless questions about everything. The cubs listened to every word. Sometimes they asked questions. Sometimes they just sat quietly and absorbed the information. Occasionally, one of them would get up to explore the observation deck again, poking into corners they'd already investigated, looking for something new. Sarah pulled out more ration bars and shared them with the cubs. The food wasn't great, but it was better than nothing. She also found some water pouches in the emergency supplies and showed the cubs how to drink from them. As the night deepened, the station grew quieter. The sounds of machinery and air circulation faded to a gentle hum. Outside the window, the nebula glowed with eternal patience. Stars wheeled slowly through the darkness. Kira yawned, showing a mouth full of sharp little teeth. She tried to hide the yawn, fighting against her exhaustion. Cubs weren't supposed to show weakness. Sarah smiled gently. "It's okay to be tired," she said. "Children need sleep. Even strong, brave children like you." Reth's eyes were half closed, but he forced them open. He wanted to stay awake and see everything and learn everything, but his body had other ideas. Sarah stood and pulled off her uniform coat. The jacket was dark blue with her rank insignia on the shoulders. She laid it on the floor on top of the emergency blankets, creating a soft nest. "Come here," she said gently to the cubs. "You can sleep. I'll keep watch. The cubs looked at the coat. Then they looked at Sarah. Then they looked at each other. Kira moved first. She walked over to the coat and sniffed it carefully. It smelled like Sarah, like safety, like the human who had protected them all night. Slowly, carefully, Kira curled up on the coat. Reth watched his sister. His instincts told him to stay alert, to remain vigilant. But he was so tired, and Sarah had proven herself trustworthy a dozen times over the long night. He walked over and lay down next to his sister. The coat was warm and soft. Sarah's scent surrounded them, and somehow that made them feel safe. Sarah sat down nearby, her back against the wall, where she could watch both the cubs and the door. "Sleep well," she whispered. "I've got you. Nothing will hurt you while I'm here." The cubs' eyes slowly closed. Their breathing deepened and slowed. Within minutes, both were asleep, curled together beneath the human woman's coat. Their small bodies rose and fell with each breath. Their claws retracted completely, a sign of total trust. Sarah watched them sleep and felt tears prick her eyes. They were so small, so far from home, so brave despite their fear. Outside the window, the first hints of dawn began to touch the edge of the nebula. The long night was almost over. Sarah hadn't slept all night. She'd kept watch while the cubs rested peacefully beneath her coat. Her back ached from sitting against the wall. Her eyes felt heavy and dry, but every time she looked at the two small forms curled together, she found the energy to stay alert. The station's systems had come back online about an hour before dawn. Sarah heard the hum of full power being restored through the walls. The emergency lights switched off and the normal lighting returned. Air circulation increased to full strength. Her datapad beeped softly. A message appeared. All emergency bulkheads opened. Station returning to normal operations, Sarah smiled. The cubs' parents would be searching for them now. This would all be over soon. The cubs would go back to their family and Sarah would finish her diplomatic escort mission. Everything would return to normal. The observation deck door suddenly exploded inward. Sarah jumped to her feet as 4 Karvathi warriors burst into the room. They were adults, much larger than the cubs, nearly 7 feet tall. Their fur was darker, almost black. They wore armor made of some kind of dark metal, and each one carried a weapon that looked like a cross between a spear and an energy rifle. The warriors spread out in attack formation, their weapons aimed at Sarah. The lead warrior's eyes glowed with fury. His voice was a deep growl that needed no translation. Behind the warriors, Sarah could see more Karvathi in the corridor. Security forces. A search party that had been looking all night. Sarah raised her hands slowly, palms out. "Easy," she said, keeping her voice calm. "Nobody needs to get hurt here." The cubs woke up with startled chirps. They scrambled out from under Sarah's coat and looked around in confusion. When they saw the warriors, they made happy sounds and started to run toward them. The lead warrior made a sharp sound that stopped the cubs in their tracks. His weapon never wavered from Sarah's chest. He spoke in the growling Karvathi language, his tone harsh and demanding. Sarah's datapad, still clipped to her belt, struggled to translate. The words appeared on the screen. "Step away from the cubs. You are under arrest for abduction of Karvathi juveniles." Sarah's stomach went cold. "This is a misunderstanding," she said clearly. "The cubs were lost during the system failure. I kept them safe. I was protecting them." The lead warrior's eyes narrowed. He took a step closer, and Sarah could see the name badge on his armor. Commander Thask. The translator caught his words. "You kept our cubs. Under your clothing. You marked them with your scent. This is a claiming ritual in your species?" "What? No!" Sarah kept her hands up. They were cold and scared. "I gave them my coat to sleep under. That's all. It was just to keep them warm." Commander Thask didn't lower his weapon. In Karvathi culture, placing your scent on another species' young was a sign of ownership, of dominance. The warrior saw only a human who had stolen their cubs and marked them as her own. Reth suddenly moved. The young cub pushed past the warriors and positioned himself between Sarah and Commander Thask's weapon. He made a long series of rapid clicks and growls. His small body was tense, ready to fight despite his size. Kira joined her brother. Both cubs placed themselves in front of Sarah, their backs to her, facing their own people's weapons. The warriors looked shocked. Cubs didn't do this. Cubs didn't defend outsiders. Cubs especially didn't protect prey species against their own people. Commander Thask barked something at the cubs. The translator showed, "Move aside. This human is dangerous." But Reth shook his head and responded in his own language. The translator struggled with the rapid speech, but Sarah caught fragments. "Protected us. Kept us safe. Gave us food. Not dangerous kind." Kira added her own voice, high and insistent. "Told us stories. Showed us her world. She promised we would see parents again. She kept promise." The lead warrior's weapon finally lowered slightly. Confusion replaced some of the anger in his eyes. He looked at Sarah with new uncertainty. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. The warriors turned as two more Karvathi entered the observation deck. These two weren't wearing armor. They wore diplomatic robes marked with complex patterns. The moment they appeared, both cubs broke away from their protective position and ran to them. "Mother, father." The translator caught their joyful cries. The female Karvathi knelt and gathered both cubs into her arms. Her eyes closed with relief as she held them close. The male Karvathi placed a hand on each cub's head, a gesture that clearly meant everything was okay now. After a long moment, the female released the cubs and stood. She was tall and elegant, her fur a lighter gray than the warriors. She looked at Sarah with large, intelligent eyes. When she spoke, her voice was much gentler than Commander Thask's. "I am Ambassador Krell's mate. These are my children. Please explain what happened." Sarah took a breath and told the story from the beginning. She explained about finding the cubs in the cargo bay, about the environmental failure and the need to find somewhere safe, about leading them through the dark corridors to the observation deck, about the malfunctioning drone and how she'd used her command codes to protect them. The ambassador's mate listened to everything without interrupting. Her expression remained neutral, but her ears swiveled forward attentively. When Sarah finished, the male Karvathi stepped forward. He was even taller than his mate, with silver streaks in his dark fur that suggested age and authority. His eyes were sharp and calculating. "I am Ambassador Krell," he said through the translator. "You kept my cubs safe through the night?" "Yes, sir," Sarah said simply. "You asked nothing in return? No payment? No favor?" Sarah blinked in confusion. "They're children. They needed help. I don't understand the question." Ambassador Krell made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You don't understand, exactly." He turned to Commander Thask. "Lower your weapons. All of you. This human is not a threat." The warriors obeyed immediately, though Commander Thask still looked uncertain. But the cubs bore her scent. She marked them with her clothing. "Because they were cold," Ambassador Krell said patiently. "Because she has something our culture often lacks. Compassion without expectation of reward." He turned back to Sarah and studied her for a long moment. "My cubs told me many things just now. They said you protected them from a malfunctioning machine, that you shared your food with them even though you had little, that you told them stories about your world and answered their endless questions, that you stayed awake all night to guard them while they slept." He paused. "They said you promised they would see us again. And you kept that promise," Sarah nodded. "Any parent would have done the same, would they?" Ambassador Krell's tone was thoughtful. "In my culture, cubs are taught independence through hardship. Adults do not coddle them. Showing weakness is punished. Asking for help is shameful." He gestured at his children. "My mate and I are trying to change this. We believe our people need to learn new ways. But it is difficult to argue against thousands of years of tradition." He walked closer to Sarah. "Until now. Until my cubs experienced something different. They met a human who showed them that protecting the vulnerable is not weakness. That trust between species is possible. That strength comes in many forms." Reth and Kira ran back to Sarah. They pressed against her legs, making happy chirping sounds. Sarah put a hand on each small head, feeling their soft fur. "They trust you completely," Ambassador Krell observed. "Karvathi cubs do not trust easily. You have done something remarkable, Lieutenant Chen. You have given my children a gift that no amount of diplomatic talking could provide. You have shown them that the galaxy is bigger and kinder than our culture has taught them." Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotion. "I just did what was right." "Exactly," the ambassador said softly. "You simply did what was right. No thought of gain. No consideration of politics or culture or species barriers. You saw children who needed help and you helped them." He looked at his mate and something passed between them. A decision made without words. Ambassador Krell turned to Commander Thask. "Spread the word among the security forces. This human is under our family's protection. Anyone who threatens her will answer to me personally." The warrior bowed his head in acknowledgement. The ambassador looked back at Sarah. "Lieutenant Chen, my family owes you a debt." "We will not forget this," Sarah shook her head. "You don't owe me anything. I'm just glad they're safe." Kira tugged on Sarah's pants leg and held up a small object. It was a tooth, small and sharp, carved with intricate patterns. The cub pressed it into Sarah's hand. Reth did the same, offering his own carved tooth. Ambassador Krell's eyes widened. "They are giving you their marking teeth. The teeth they lost when their adult teeth came in. This is significant. They are making you honorary family." Sarah looked at the two small teeth in her palm. They were warm and surprisingly heavy. She knelt down and looked both cubs in the eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll keep these safe always." The cubs chirped happily and pressed their faces against hers. 3 days had passed since that morning in the observation deck. Sarah had completed her diplomatic escort assignment. The Valorian trade minister had arrived. The peace talks had concluded, and Sarah should have been on a transport back to her ship by now. But Ambassador Krell had requested that she remain on the station. "A private meeting," he'd said. "Important matters to discuss." Sarah stood in the diplomatic wing now, in a private conference room decorated in Carvathi style. The walls were covered in rust-red fabric that reminded her of the sand from the cubs' homeworld. Low benches lined the room instead of chairs. The lighting was warm and dim. Ambassador Krell entered with his mate. Behind them came Reth and Kira, freshly groomed and wearing small decorative bands around their necks. The cubs saw Sarah and immediately ran to her. She knelt and hugged them both. "I heard you're leaving soon," Kira said through the translator device the ambassador had given her. The translation was much better than Sarah's basic app. "Tomorrow morning," Sarah confirmed. "My ship is waiting for me." Reth made a sad sound. "We will miss you," Sarah's heart squeezed. "I'll miss you too. Both of you." Ambassador Krell gestured for Sarah to sit on one of the benches. She did, and both cubs immediately climbed up to sit beside her. The ambassador and his mate sat across from them. "Lieutenant Chen," the ambassador began, "what happened 3 nights ago has caused quite a stir in the Carvathi diplomatic community. The story of the human who protected our cubs has spread to every delegation on this station." Sarah shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't do it for recognition, sir." "I know," he said. "That is precisely why the story has such power." He leaned forward. "Let me explain something about my people. For generations we have believed that strength means standing alone, that needing others is weakness, that showing compassion makes you vulnerable." He paused. "This belief has made us powerful warriors, but it has also isolated us from the wider galactic community." His mate spoke up. "We have few allies. Other species find us difficult to work with. They see us as aggressive and dominating. Many species fear us." Her voice carried sadness. "They are not wrong to fear us. We have given them many reasons." Ambassador Krell nodded. "My mate and I are part of a political movement on our homeworld. We believe the Carvathi must change. We must learn to work with other species to build true alliances, to see cooperation as strength rather than weakness." He smiled slightly. "We have been arguing this position for 10 years, making speeches, writing papers, debating in political forums, and we have made very little progress." He gestured at his cubs. "Then my children got lost on a space station, and a human they had never met kept them safe all night. Not because of treaties or alliances or political advantage, simply because they needed help." Sarah began to understand where this was going. "My cubs told their story to the other Carvathi on this station," the ambassador continued. "They described how you protected them from a malfunctioning drone, how you shared your food, how you told them about Earth and showed them that other species approach life differently than we do, how you stayed awake all night to watch over them." Reth spoke up excitedly. "We told them about dogs and cats and horses, about how humans make friends with other creatures." Kira added, "We explained that Sarah said protecting children is the most important job, that all adults should help all children no matter what species they are." The ambassador's mate smiled at her cubs. They spoke from their hearts, and other Carvathi listened. Not to another political speech, but to children describing something they had experienced. She looked at Sarah. Children do not lie easily. Their truth carried weight that no adult argument could match. Ambassador Krell pulled out a datapad and showed Sarah a screen. It was filled with text in Carvathi script, but the translator rendered it into English. It was a message from the Carvathi High Council. Sarah read through it, her eyes widening. The High Council had heard the story of the Cubs and the human. They had reviewed the ambassador's proposal for deeper alliance cooperation. They had voted to move forward with establishing formal partnerships with several species, including humanity. Your actions with my cubs accomplished more in one night than 10 years of political work, the ambassador said quietly. You showed them through deed rather than word that cooperation between species is not only possible, but natural. That caring for those who are vulnerable is a sign of strength, not weakness. Sarah felt overwhelmed. I just helped 2 lost children. I didn't mean to start a political movement. The best changes often begin with simple acts of kindness, the ambassador's mate said. Grand gestures and speeches are forgotten. But a human woman who stayed awake all night to guard sleeping cubs, that is a story that will be told for generations. Ambassador Krell reached into his robe and pulled out a small wooden box. He opened it to reveal a medallion made of dark metal engraved with complex patterns. This is a guardian's mark. In Carvathi culture, it is given only to warriors who save our cubs from death in battle. You are the first non-Carvathi to ever receive one. He stood and walked to Sarah. He placed the medallion around her neck with formal ceremony. The cubs watched with solemn eyes, understanding the significance even if Sarah didn't fully grasp it. You are now guardian to the family of Krell, the ambassador said. This bond is recognized by all Carvathi. You will always be welcome on our world. Our family's honor is tied to yours. We will defend you as we would defend our own cubs. Sarah touched the medallion. It was surprisingly heavy. The metal was warm against her chest. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Say you will visit our homeworld someday, Kira said hopefully. We want to show you the red sand canyons, and the hunting grounds, and the ancient monuments, Reth nodded eagerly. And we want to meet your human cubs, your nephew and niece. We want to show them how to climb like Carvathi. Sarah laughed through the tears gathering in her eyes. I would love that. I promise I'll visit. Another promise, Ambassador Krell observed. And I believe you will keep this one too. They talked for another hour. The ambassador explained more about the political changes happening in Carvathi society. His mate described their homeworld and its culture. The cubs asked endless questions about Earth and human customs. Eventually, Sarah had to leave. She had a transport to catch early the next morning. She said goodbye to the ambassador and his mate with formal bows that they returned with equal respect. The cubs walked with her to the diplomatic wing's exit. At the doorway, both cubs hugged her tightly. Sarah hugged them back, memorizing the feeling of their soft fur and their small, strong bodies. Be good, Sarah told them. Listen to your parents. Keep exploring and asking questions. We will, Kira promised. And remember, Reth added, humans are friends. We will tell everyone, Sarah smiled. Not just humans. Remember what I taught you. Every species has something valuable to offer. Every person deserves a chance to prove themselves. Don't judge by appearance or species. Judge by actions. The cubs nodded seriously, absorbing this lesson one more time. Sarah walked away down the corridor. She could feel the cubs watching her until she turned a corner and moved out of sight. The next morning, Sarah stood at the transport dock's viewing window. Her ship was preparing for departure. Station personnel moved around her, but she barely noticed them. She was looking at a different window across the station's central hub. There, pressed against the transparent aluminum, were 2 small figures with silver fur, Reth and Kira with their parent standing behind them. The cubs had their paws pressed against the window. Watching her leave, Sarah raised her hand in a wave. The cubs waved back, their whole bodies wiggling with the effort. Ambassador Krell placed his hands on his cubs' shoulders. Even from this distance, Sarah could see him speaking to them, teaching them. The cubs nodded, learning another lesson about friendship and goodbye and the connections that survive distance. Sarah touched the guardian's mark at her neck. In her pocket, wrapped carefully in cloth, were the 2 carved teeth the cubs had given her. She would keep them safe. Someday, when she had children of her own, she would show them the teeth and tell them this story. The story of 2 cubs who got lost on a space station, who explored dark corridors with fearless curiosity, who learned that the galaxy was bigger and kinder than they'd been taught, who slept at dawn beneath a human woman's coat and woke to find that family could cross any barrier. The boarding announcement came over the speakers. Sarah took one last look at the cubs in their distant window. They were still waving. She turned and walked toward her ship. Behind her, Junction Station continued its eternal work of bringing different species together. Commerce and diplomacy would continue. Treaties would be signed and trade agreements negotiated. But Sarah knew that the real work of building bridges between species happened in smaller, quieter moments. In cargo bays where lost children found help. In observation decks where stories were shared. In simple acts of kindness that asked nothing in return. Thank you for watching and comment for next part.